Well, hi again, and welcome to Coffee with Craig. And today's going to be a bit more of an unusual Coffee with Craig because on this channel, myself, Craig Hamilton Parker, I'm a psychic medium. We discuss what's going on in the world. We make some prophecies about world events sometimes. I share with you my psychic insights and this sort of thing. And if you've been here before, you'll know all this already. And if you haven't been here before, do follow the channel. And if you're here for the umpteenth time, don't forget to give us a thumbs up because that helps the algorithm. All right, we got all that out of the way. But I want to talk to you today about a major transformation that happened in my life and set me on a completely different spiritual course. And that was when I discovered the Naadi oracles. Now, I've mentioned them many, many times on this site, and some of you are already quite familiar with this idea of these Indian Naadi oracles, palm leaf oracles. And I want to share with you some of the things that happened to me, my personal story about this, because I've given a few glimpses and hints about this throughout the channel time and time again. But I thought I'd give you a little bit more deeper insight into the story of what happened and how it completely transformed the way I think spiritually. And it also revealed to me lots of things about the future of the world as well. Not completely in their entirety, but given us hints. And I think I referenced some of those things that were said to me and sometimes said in other people's oracles. And yeah, so I'm going to explain to you what that oracle is and how it completely flipped my life around. Gave me a completely new insight of where I was going in life, and kind of in a way really helped me spiritually to put my life on a slightly different course. Now, okay, so my background first and foremost is I've been a psychic medium most of my life. Right from a child, I saw auras. I experienced telepathy a lot as a child and right the way through. I could tell you the whole story about the development of the mediumship in my life, which was absolutely an interesting story, actually. And in my life, it kind of took me by storm. I was kind of dragged into mediumship. It wasn't something I really thought I watched other mediums and wanted to be like that. I hadn't seen any mediums, didn't know what they were. And I had an amazing encounter with a famous medium called Doris Stokes, who gave me a reading which completely blew my mind at the time, told me how I'd meet my wife, Jane, told me her first name and her surname, told me the very date we would meet. And it kind of flipped the way I thought about the world there. I thought, my God, this has been prophesized, and is my life laid out like a map? So without going into too much detail on that, because I will explore that in another video, actually, I set off on a path as a medium, and I met my wife, Jane, and we worked together because Jane is a medium as well. We met in a spiritualist church when I'm giving what's called a demonstration of mediumship. Now, mediumship's the communication between the medium, the medium, or a medium, and the spirit world, and it's kind of done by a sort of telepathy, really. And we blend our thoughts, and I give messages to people living on Earth from the other side, and those can be extremely comforting for people. Of course, they can. It gives you the solace of knowing that life continues. It helps you to understand that the suffering of a person is very temporary, and that it's just the action of stepping through the door, of stepping from this world into the next, and the next world's fine. And we retain our memory, we retain our sense of personality, we retain our connections with people, our friendships with people. In fact, when we pass into the next world, we live in many ways a similar world to this one, a glorified version of it in many ways. And for me as a thinking person, at first, all these ideas seemed a bit preposterous. It's tea and biscuits in heaven, I called it. This seems like wishful thinking. And yet, the more I explored mediumship, but the very act of having the gift was a weird thing. Here was me, a kind of, in many ways, a skeptically minded person being given evidence and proof from the spirit side. I would say things to people, and I think, how did I know that? How did I know their address that they lived at? How did I know the first name and surname of their granddad? How did I know that they, just had a kidney taken out or something? I mean, all sorts of stuff that you just knew. And so this had become my world. This had become my spiritual path. I like people like Doris Stokes and Gordon Higgins and other great spiritualists. I was focused on the idea that this spiritualist concept of the world was what happened, and it is correct. It does. This is one level. This is one understanding of the reality of our world. So I was living my life as a psychic medium and having a very interesting life that way. I gave up a good career to do it. I was managing director of a successful advertising agency. Gave all that up. And when people say, "Oh, you mediums, you go and rip people off," you give up that sort of lifestyle and go and start doing one-to-one readings with people, and you'll know that it's not about money. It's about being a calling. So this was my first calling, and it was a joyful calling, really. And I supported myself with things like writing books and doing readings. And Jane and I struggled. We really did struggle to keep a livelihood together, particularly when you've got a young family. It was a difficult path at that time in life. But I gradually built up a business, and I was given a message from the spirit. I'm perhaps going too long into this, but it's a long story, so I hope you don't mind. I'm going to talk a long time today with this one. But yeah, so I developed a career in mediumship, but it was still a major struggle. And then I remember having a reading with a medium. Oh, where was he down? I think it was, I can't remember which spiritualist church it was now. It was a private reading with a medium who said to me, "I see you looking into lots and lots of computers, and I see computers all over the world." Now, this was a time way before the internet. This is back in the 80s. "And I see you communicating with people and talking it into computer screens." Well, he was bang on, because along came the internet. And with it, I remembered that reading. And when I discovered about the internet, which is in the early 1990s, I got online very, very quickly, hence my domain name at the top of the screen, psychics.co.uk. You could buy whichever one you wanted then. Some of them were free. Anyway, I set up a website when I learned what to do, and turned my mediumship into an online community, and gradually built up a major community online, one of the first internet communities. I mean, some of you that come here, I'll be interested if any of you remember this. It's going back a bit now, but it was I called it the Psychics and Mediums Network, but we had chat rooms, particularly chat rooms called Delphi, which was the popular public one. And we had absolutely millions of people coming to us. Millions were coming into the chat rooms. It was absolute chaos to control it. But they became a platform for myself and other mediums that I knew from spiritualism, particularly from Stansted, which is one of the this is the UK's organisation behind spiritualism. And we taught on there and gave lessons in chat rooms and did mediumistic demonstrations in chat rooms, which was absolutely revolutionary at the time. Nobody had ever done anything like that. So my site grew and grew and grew, and I was making a good living from this, because I brought other services in, monetized it, as you call it. And so everything was going fine and dandy. We had holiday books to go to Disney and so forth. And then almost overnight, things went wrong, because Google decided that I had too many duplicate pages, I think it would have been. They brought in this algorithm at the time called Panda, and they also brought in penguin, I think it was, all weird animals anyway. And my site got blown to pieces, because it was mainly based on user supplied content, which was lots of things being repeated quite a lot. The forums got crushed. Google wanted to bring its own new thing called Google Plus in, which was tried to destroy forums. And overnight, my site went from millions of visitors to just a trickle. It just shows the power of these big global companies. Well, completely, suddenly we were in a really, really difficult situation, and completely crushed, actually, because suddenly we had no income. I mean, obviously people still came to us for readings and so forth, but they were local people coming in at a trickle, because we completely put the focus on the internet. and to rethink what I was going to do. Didn't know what to do, which way to turn. And we were back in a situation like right at the very start when I'd given up my advertising business, and we were literally looking down the settees to find if we could find enough money to get a pint of milk together because the children needed some milk. You know, I mean, it was that difficult for us in the early days. And there we were back in a crisis situation. But we kind of got through it. But it was a very, very difficult time. Now, at that time, I'd also had been exploring for a long time an idea that I'd heard about in India called the Naadi oracles. Now, these are ancient oracles that I'd heard of at that time, going back in the 90s. Again, we're talking about this. Now, but at that time, not many people were really on the internet in the same way. I'd kind of cornered the market, as it were, when I say I had so many people coming into the chat rooms. But it was still quite early days for the internet. But I had been in touch with a friend, and we'd been talking about these Naadi oracles in India because I'd heard about them. I think I'd read about them somewhere. It might have been a Colin Wilson book or some research that I'd done somewhere. And these oracles I'd heard about. When you consult them, oh yeah, there was a BBC program going back right in the 80s that also talked about them. And I was, so that was what triggered it. I remember now because that program got me interested in it first, and I started looking it up and trying to find. I couldn't find any information anywhere on it, just snippets of bits and pieces that told you about this oracle in India that had written on it the name of whoever will consult it. Now, I think the one on the BBC was actually not the Naadi that I'd consulted. I think it was the Brighad Samhita that had been consulted there. But the journalist consulted the leaf, and on it was his name. Now, I'd heard about this, and I'd heard about how on the name on the leaf of an oracle has all the names of your mother's name, your father's name, and all the names of your family, the time of your birth, and so forth. And I thought, I'd love to find that. Could I ever track it down? Well, I'd become great friends with an Indian man called Vivek, and we had a lot of conversations on the internet because we were both very interested in Sathya Sai Baba. I'd been to India to see Sathya Sai Baba, which is another massive story, which I could talk for hours on, in which I saw the Indian holy man who could materialize things out of thin air. And I saw him in close, right close, like this screen's close to you. I saw him materialize Vibhuti ash out of his fingers, not to me, but to someone right next to me. And that was enough for me because I saw, bang, that for me, I was seeing something that was totally, totally impossible. And I could see, I seen it at such close quarters, I could see it wasn't trickery. I mean, there's been a lot of negative press about him, so you can check out the other side of it if you want, but that's a nonsense as far as I'm concerned. I saw it with my own eyes. I always say in life, you have to trust your own experience. This is something that I hammer home in the videos I talk about on this channel. So anyway, we were both Sai Baba devotees. I'm not a devotee of anybody because I always believe you've got to be a free agent in the world. I don't believe in religion. I don't believe in organizing things. I like to think of myself as like the bee that goes between the flowers and collects the honey. You can gather from all of it and create your own individual spirituality. I think that's what we have to do. Anyway, I've always been very independent minded like that. It's not always for everybody that. But anyway, Vivek and I got discussing, and he said, Craig, I've found that oracle in India. And not only have I found it, I've been over there and I've gathered together a group of them. I got 3 or 4 people, and I was thinking that it would be a brilliant idea if I could maybe present this to the world, and we could I could do readings for people on Skype. And I thought, wow, interesting. And he says, but no. He says, but I trust you, Craig, because I mean, we've been talking to each other for years, and you've given me readings, and you've given my friends readings and things and that, and you would know the difference between a real person and a scammer. And I said yes, because I'd seen so much of it in my life. I'd been involved in helping to filter out real psychics from fake psychics for some of these psychic telephone lines, for example. I mean, you get all sorts of Tom, Dicks and Harry trying to be psychics, some completely bonkers. You've probably had readings from some of them. I mean, I'm not knocking everybody, because there's a lot of obviously loads of genuine ones as well. But, you know, with the internet particularly, millions have come out of the woodwork. Where have all these psychics come from? Suddenly everybody's psychic. Well, hopefully the world is developing. But back to it. I do wander, don't I, when I chat? But what happened in the end is he said to me, "Look, Craig, can you test them for me? You know, if I get you to have a couple of readings with these guys, can you check out and see, is it really absolutely genuine? Because it's mind-boggling to me," he said. And I said, "Yeah, well, I'd absolutely love to," because I've got to backtrack a little bit here. I'd had that crisis in my life at the time that I talked about, right? And just before Vivek and I got in touch to talk about this, I'd had a dream. And in that dream, I met Sathya Sai Baba. Now, people say that if you meet, hang on, let's have a drink. People say that when you meet Sathya Sai Baba in a dream, it's a real experience. That really is happening. It's not some dream. It's not symbolic. You can't dream about Sathya Sai Baba unless he wills it. Those of you that follow Sathya Sai Baba or still follow Sathya Sai Baba will know that's true. You can't have a dream unless he wills it. So this was a very, very powerful dream. And in the dream, I was in Varanasi, which is the holy city in India. Varanasi was made of gold in the dream. And there was a sunken temple in the dream as well, and which was actually the place I ended up going to in Varanasi when I visited India. And I'm doing yoga, which I was doing on the ghats, as they call it, where they burn the bodies, where there's other yogis there. This is where the yogis live in, the very austere yogis live underneath the funeral pyres. Okay, so I was in that place doing yoga, of all things. I wasn't doing anything like those yogis that do that. This was kind of just doing like physical yoga and meditation. And I sat there after having done yoga and sat in meditation on my mat, as it were. And Sai Baba, I see, comes up to me. And I look at him and he says to me, he looks at me in the eye, and I go, "Sai Baba, Sai Baba." He goes, "Why are you here?" And I tried to give various answers of why I was here. And he goes, "No, why are you here?" I go, and I give another answer. "Why are you here?" I give another. "Why are you here?" It was a very profound dream. It's like someone almost wanting to shake you awake, you know? Why am I here? Why am I here? And of course, I wake up from the dream. I put it in more detail in one of my books, actually. But I wake up from the dream, and that question of why am I here? Why am I here? And I'm thinking, well, yeah, you know, when you think about why am I here? Yeah, okay, I've been here as a medium. That's always been my answer to it, but that didn't seem to be good enough, you know, to prove to people that life continues after death. But that's all that's telling us is there's more of the same. So what's the essence behind that? Why? And there's this person here, like the same question that you have to answer for yourself in your life, don't you? Because we all have to do it, don't we? Why am I here? What's the purpose? What's the meaning? What's the significance of me being here? I can say and give all sorts of grandiose answers. It's here to give love into the world. It's here to help other people. It's here to, but the question never really ever gets answered, does it? These are all aspects of why I'm here. They're not the actual essence of it. So it's an almost impossible question to ask in so many levels. But we can perhaps get a bit closer to it sometimes. Now, while all that is running in my mind and my business at that time had collapsed, I was in a very vulnerable state in many respects, but also in a very prime state, ready to discover something completely new about life and my life and the purpose and meaning of existence. I was very open to this thing. At the same time, I also had other fascinating dreams as well that I described in my book about the big transformations in China with the dance of the flowers and things like this that I talk about in my book as well, and things like this. It was a very transformative time because, you know, I was going through a major change where suddenly you were having to rethink everything, and I was rethinking the very act of mediumship. You know, not saying the mediumship's wrong. Of course, it's fantastic. I still do mediumship all the time, but there had to be more. There had to be more. The answers that spiritualism seemed to be giving me were very shallow. They were very little old lady type of philosophy in some respects. It's not all like that. Spiritual is probably screaming at me now, but it's not all like that. But a lot of it has deteriorated to that. So I needed a greater sense of what is the meaning, what is the purpose in life. And then, of course, Vivek and I get chatting, and he said, I found the oracle. I found the Naadi oracle. So let's explore it. So I said, okay, what we're going to do then, look, we've got to approach this with a totally skeptical mind, Vivek, if we're going to test these readers to find out if it's real or not. Now, first and foremost, we can't have them going on the internet, because I've got an internet website. People will know who I am. So we're going to have to disguise everything about who I am, so they can't go looking me up. I said they probably wouldn't know who I am to see if they saw my face, because most of what I was doing on the internet was in chat rooms behind the scenes. So let's see if we can find a way of doing that. So we set up a fake email address, first of all, and we set up a fake Zoom account, so it didn't have anything on my name, no references, no nothing you could check up. And we didn't give them any information about who they were going to give a reading to. So literally, there wasn't any questions in advance or anything like that. I didn't give them a name, didn't tell them anything about me, didn't give them a birth date or anything like that. It would just be, we're going to go on Zoom, bang, we're going to go on Zoom. Now, the way the oracle works is it takes your thumbprint. For a man, it takes your right thumbprint. For a woman, it takes your left thumbprint, right? And from that, this is incredible in itself, actually. From that thumbprint, it finds a bundle of the Naadi palm leaves. Now, when they say palm leaves, you think of a flapping leaf, but it's not like that. It's a wooden stick. It looks a bit like an old-fashioned 12-inch ruler, really, in a way. And on it is written in ancient Tamil, and it's an ancient form of Tamil. And it's written in a kind of a shorthand language, right? And written on it is all the information about whoever will consult that leaf. And what you have is you have a bundle of these leaves, and that thumbprint will find the bundle that's in the library of the Nadis. Now, these libraries are scattered all over India. There's one or two big ones down in Tamil Nadu area, and most of it's in the south of India. Some of it is up in Delhi. There's another oracle up in Delhi, and there's others scattered around. There's some in Indonesia even, and a few scattered around. People I've spoken to have consulted the ones even in Indonesia, where the Hindu community has kind of moved around the world. Now, these oracles are supposed to be, and I believe them to be true, thousands of years old. Somebody got them carbon dated, and they carbon dated it to 500 years old. But what happens with the Nadis is that they get written and rewritten on these palm leaves. So when it starts, they write them in this strange little shorthand type of script, which is all done phonetically. It's sort of sound as opposed to structured letters. I won't go into too much detail on that. But on the leaf is written the story of each person's life, but you've got to find your leaf, and not all the leaves are there. Some of the leaves have been destroyed. The British Raj burnt a load of them, so there's a percentage of them are missing completely. So you're not necessarily going to find your leaf. But we thought, well, okay, let's see if we can find the leaf. So first and foremost, I gave them a thumbprint, and only from that thumbprint, no other information whatsoever. From that thumbprint, they found the bundles. So the first reader that I tested, as it were, it's me to test the Nadis. The first reader that I was going to test had found the bundle, and then we'd go on to Zoom. Now, I will say this. There are out there thousands and thousands of fake Naadi readers. So important you remember this if you start on this journey. So important that you remember that you've got to be careful. You'll get Naadi readers grab you now at the airports. You'll get Naadi services on the internet. Not all of them are fake, but some of them are dodgy, seriously dodgy, okay, because they use techniques to trick you. So was this one going to do the same? Because we wanted to make sure that we were on something genuine. Well, all he had was my thumbprint. And what they do is they read through the first leaf on each leaf, but there's the bundle of them. You read the first one, and it will say something odd. I remember one of them coming up was things like, you import metals for a living. No, right? Sometimes it'll ask you a letter. The beginning of your name begins with a yes, and sometimes that they might say it's C, R, or H. It'll So that feels a bit like 20 questions. But when you analyze it back, there's no way they could work it out from that information, because they'll it's going all over the place. I keep a careful note, because remember, we were checking this to make sure we're carefully recording it as well, to make sure we go back and check it. Is there any way he could trick you into that? So it goes through these weird questions, a series of weird questions. That's what happens. And this is what happened if you have your Nadi done, and what happened to you. Right? And I'm going to show you how to get your own Nadis done later on in the show. But so he read the notes, read them out, and he read all these nonsense lines, and I think, no, God, no, it's not my leaf, not my leaf. No. And then he flips over one, and he says, your first wife's name is Tina. What? How would he know that? I mean, that's true. My first wife's name was Tina. There's absolutely nothing I've ever written in books about that. Kind of don't mention it, but where did they get that? There's no way they could get that information whatsoever, right? And then he goes, your second wife's name is Jane. Huh? Yes, correct. And then he looks again. Your father's name was Donald. They would say it in an odd sort of way. We got Hindi, sort of Indian. Half the problem with doing these is it's so difficult to understand the language. I'd fortunately had met a lot of Indian people through Sai Barbara's groups and things like that, so I could sort of get the hang of the language a bit. For many people, it's very, very hard to understand what they're saying. But anyway, he goes, your second wife's name is Jane. Your father's name is Donald. He used to work first job in tax office. I thought, yeah, crikey, his first job before he became a teacher was delivering the tax records or something. He told me that. Even my brother didn't know that. I thought, how did he know that? My sister didn't even know that. Nobody knew it. I knew that because my dad told me that was my first job. And so that was information that certainly wasn't out there. And then he goes, your mother has two names, Ethel, and calls herself Vicky. And my mother's name is Ethel, which I used to pull a leg about, right? And she always called herself Victoria when she met my father, or Vicky, right? Because you didn't want that rather Ethel from Wigan, it doesn't sound quite as good as Vicky, does it? So I'd always made a big show of that in the family. But that blew me too. Two names. How did he know two names? And he told me my brother's name. He told me. And then he says, your name is Craig. And I go, yes. How did you know that? And then he says, and your date of birth. And he gave me my exact date of birth, because he wasn't just give me my date of birth, but he gave me the time I was born as well, to the minute. And I thought, oh, how did he know that? Because that's not out there anywhere. None of that information is out there whatsoever. That was my leaf. Now, I haven't been a medium all my life. I've always stressed the importance of evidence, and I think people find it mind-blowing when you communicate with the spirit world and you can give a name and you can give a address or whatever. I mean, those are the secondary things, or really detailed events of what happened in a person's life. It's what we call evidence of survival. And as a medium, I always try to give as much evidence as I can, and it varies. Sometimes it's fantastic, sometimes it's less detailed. It depends what the environment is, depends on the person, depends on your audience and so forth. But I'd always given this idea of evidence. So for me, this was what I call evidence. It was evidential. I thought, that is undeniable information that he's given me there. So from that, I thought, okay, now I will read the leaf. So we had a few minutes break, actually, just so he could just gather himself together. He wouldn't have been able to look anything up on the internet on that basis. But what came next wasn't really anything to do with what he already knew. It was more about what would happen in one's life. He told me about how I'd written lots of books and things like that, and that was true. But he named. He said about a book. He said, you write a book about what happens after death, and I'd written what to do when you're dead. Again, he wouldn't have got any of this from the internet. There was no chance. I mean, he was in view. He told me all about my writing, and particularly focused on the writing at that time, which is still very important to me. He focused on, he told me all about my life and how it was now about to change into a major direction in which I would now be prophesizing the future. So it's like I'm going from both me. He told about how you communicate with the dead. It was all very interesting, and talked about the importance of this and not to give up on it, because I was beginning to get very despondent about what was going on in my life and what I should be doing and how I should be earning a living. And he told me about, encouraged me to get on and on and on with it. He told me also that he told me about my past lives. In this particular Nadi, I had been a somewhat fierce, because of the name, version of a Shivite, and Brava, whatever, I can't remember the name of the Indian god version of Shiva that's the fierce version of Shiva. And I used to throw people out the temple if I got angry with the way they were doing things right. And he says your big problem is you have a temper. And actually, that's true. People don't know that I can have a silly temper sometimes. It's gone. I think I've cracked most of it. Not entirely, but most of it. So driving is still a difficult. Cyclists are still a problem. But I suppose I did have, and I thought, well, yeah, that's quite interesting, because I can blow if people, if I see something that I feel is an injustice. Particularly, I used to get cross, and I thought, well, you knew all that, and most people didn't know that. And he talked about that came from that previous life, because you were so dedicated a Shivite that you would be a bit intolerant to people. I suppose that had happened. Other Nadis later on revealed different past lives. In one in which I was a woman, I was supposed to be a woman saint, and one in which I was I'd been like, it sounded like the Chancellor of the Exchequer, which was interesting because I'd always believed that I was very high up in the financial services in Rome. I've never done anything in financial services well, I have, I suppose, in my advertising agent. It was all for financial service organizations, come to think of it. Actually, perhaps that's where that came from, thinking about it. But but I always had these powerful dreams of Rome, and there was one there that described what I think was my life in Rome. I can remember it. We used to Vespasian, the Vespasian. We used to joke and laugh about it. I used to have a regular dream about being in somewhere that was a bathhouse. It felt like the one that I'd seen in Herculaneum, in which we were laughing about Vespasian, because we went into the bathhouse and I thought, this is the place I know. This is where I had that dream where we were joking about the emperor. Anyway, because he was a fool, we said. I'm going off, but it's interesting. I think you might find this quite interesting. So there we go. It was throwing up this first Nadi, and the consequence, the other ones, gave me a whole background of my life as a past life. Now I'm going to merge a few of these together actually now, because I did this first Nadi, which absolutely blew my mind. I did another Nadi, which again we put the same things into detail there to find out make sure that we know there's no cheating going on. And I did a third Nadi too. And all three Nadis were in different parts of India. There was no way they could communicate within each other. There was no way. And I suppose you could say the weak point in here could be Vivek, because he knew who I was, but no way. He was solid and someone that I'd known a long time. Very, very devout man. And I basically got incredible confirmation. This is going before anybody else knew about the Nadis. I didn't know anybody else who knew about this all those years ago. So it was kind of a weird world I was in here. I was given this information, and by all these different, and they all did different versions and different ways of doing it too. I mean, one of the Nadis was a conversation between Shiva and Pravati. It was his wife, and they talking about me, and she's asking for my sake and for the future of mankind's sake. And well, anyway, after that first Nadi, I remember coming out and I told Jane what I was going to do and things like that. My wife Jane, and I came out of the room after the Skype meeting. I thought, what was all that about? It was a weird feeling. There was like an energy that had been lifted, because he told me what I had to do in life, right? He told me about my work doing predictions about world events. And I thought, well, that's odd. And he telling me the rishis will be behind you. The rishis will try to help you to get your information correct. Because before that, I'd always sort of kind of been a bit against, Jane laughed at me because I'd always been a bit against the idea of predicting the future, because we did the Big Breakfast, right? And we were put on the Big Breakfast show. This is going back a bit further. I'm jumping around a bit here, but this is going back before the internet. And me and Jane were on the Big Breakfast, and we used to produce Next Week's News Today. Bob Geldof has introduced us onto the show when we were with Bob Geldof's wife, and we got the point to predict next week's news today. And I'm saying to Jane, look, oh God, all we're doing is predicting the news. What I want to do is present mediumship. I want to prove to people life after death. That's where our skill is. That's the most incredible thing, rather than this titillating sort of everybody's newscaster type of stuff. And this is just entertainment. And I got really cross about it. But then the Naadi said, right, no, that you're going to do all that stuff. You're going to be doing that stuff. But for me, it's many respects, it's my way into you guys. You see, I make predictions about the future of the world, right? And now here you are, have come to this channel probably for things like that. And now here you are listening to me talking about high level spiritual stuff. You see, this is high level spiritual stuff. So, and ways to transform and change your own life, So here we go. It's a way in, isn't it? I've caught you. You see, I've caught you. And we can talk about more deeper stuff, you see. And it told me that it gave me this name in one of the Nadis, which we're going to a bit later. It gave me this name of a different spiritual name that I'm to use in the world, and not to and to see and it talked about me being as like a spiritual teacher, right? So it gives me the spiritual name. It tells me to work with that. It tells me to work on these different levels with working with life after death, but also teaching about the future and being able to see the future. And so where do I take it now? Because there was so much in this. I mean, when I came out of that first reading and I came into Jane and told her what happened, I was literally staggering. I was staggering that so much information could be given to me. It had told me that my future was to do this, but it was to open a spiritual center. Now, Jane and I would have loved to have done the idea of a spiritual spirit, saying you're going to open up a spiritual center. You're going to open up a spiritual center. It's going to be life-changing for people in the world. And that is now happening. These things have started to unfold. We've got people helping us that are going to help us with that spiritual center. Jane and I have we bought a lovely property in Italy, and underneath it, we're trying to convert that into a spiritual center where we can start to take this teachings further. They didn't call it a spiritual center. They called it an ashram, which is like what spiritual teachers in India do. Like you go to Sai Baba's ashram. It's the place you go to learn the teaching of Sai Baba. So it's not necessarily all yoga type things. It's all different type of things. I think the Nadis will be a very big part of that eventually. Now, where do we take the story from here? Because there's so much that happened from this. I've kind of told you about the first revelation of the Nadis. I then went on and I met Kim Sol, who died a little while ago. Now, he's a brilliant genius that knew so much about the Nadis. I started doing research, trying to find new people. I found Kim Sol. He then started to introduce me to the deeper Nadis, right? You think it can't go deeper. You can go deep, deep, deep here, because he started to introduce me some of the things. For example, the most incredible one of them all was what's called the Jiva Nadi. Now, this is a mind boggler, and this is part of a whole other sequence of mysterious oracles from India as well. There's other ones that are like this, made in metal plates and things like this. But this Jiva Nadi is particularly interesting because this leaf is just one leaf and it's blank. When you consult it, you have to do a series of mantras, and the answer to your question will appear on the leaf in letters of light. And then it's red, like having it come up on your phone. I mean, an ancient 5,000, 10,000 year old. We don't know how old these leaves are. What they think it could go back to the before the Ice Age, to the ancient ages. There's all sorts of references in the leaves that I've been finding about earlier ages and things like this. And the Jiva Nadi writes in letters of light. It gives you the answer. Now that is not something that's open to the public. It's something that you still have to track down and find. And this and other oracles Kim had introduced me to, so I was able to access some of these miraculous oracles. Now they did give some of the hints of what will happen in the world. I can't reveal all that, but there's things that is talked about in there. Some of the things it said about that, it sort of talked about this gas cloud that I've mentioned before, and how to help guide people with the gas cloud. It said so. There's a hint that there's going to be some giant gas cloud in the world. There was also hints of another potential catastrophe that came through other nadis, and I'm still not 100% sure of this, about a meteor that would come between the Earth and the Moon. It wouldn't hit the Earth, but it would come between the Earth and the Moon and cause great consternation on the Earth, but not the destruction of the Earth, if I'm correct in this. But these are hinted. We've got something coming towards the Earth at the moment they're talking about. So that one of many, anyway, there's hints of things like that in there. In the another Nadi, Brughan Samhita, that we found Donald Trump's Nadi, which talked about his life and his re-election. It didn't talk about Donald Trump as being a really holy man or anything. It didn't say. People have misread what I've said about that sometimes. It said that he'd been some pretty rough stuff in his life and stuff hidden away. Right, some things put in there that I don't think I dare say. Okay, but some bad stuff, but also that he would become a very powerful force within the world. And from what I read in it, it seemed that what he's doing will help the world to get back on its feet and perhaps bring back a bit of common sense. But it's good and bad what it says in there, because it said all of the past lives it gives us, for example, are about the bad stuff, really. I mean, that's what you look in the Nadi for. You don't want to go, if you want to go to a Nadi to get a comforting reading, the proper Nadis, as it were, they will give you a comfort, it'll give you hope, it'll give you inspiration, but it's not going to be one of these ones like, this sort of tarot reader is going to pat you on the back and say everything's going to be all right, you're going to meet Mr. Right and all the rest of it. It's brutal sometimes of what it says, but it does it deliberately to make you move. It's like a knock around the head. It wakes you up. You're gonna, depending on how much you need to wake up, the heavier the hit. And it did it for me. It put me on a new path. It made me rethink everything that I was doing in life. But Trump's Nadi was in there too. And the thing I found interesting was in his past life, it said that in his past life, he'd been a Shiva priest of very high standing and a very high level, and was a very high spiritual being at that point, but fell from grace big time because he stole from the temple and put money first. And that he also at that same time became an alcoholic. So he became an alcoholic thief from the temple. But that still positive energy that was before that can overcome that negativity, and that he can become and will, in the last part of his life after his presidency, seek spiritual solace and become and talk about spiritual transformation in his life. Now that even now seems crazy, but after he had that shot, after, you remember I predicted the coming of his assassination attempt and the near miss, and by God, I said he'd be blooded but not hurt. Well, it did. It took his ear, didn't it? What a transformation moment for him. And it's made him think very spiritually minded, in not necessarily in the same way you and I might be, but it makes you think. It makes you think that you've become a man of destiny, doesn't it? That providence has interfered. It has to be mentioned that's happened to other people. For example, Hitler just survived a bomb attack, and he said, "Providence has told me that I'm supposed to do something major," And similar with Farage. He had the airplane crash, didn't he? The transformative moment that suddenly makes you see your life in a bigger perspective and makes you want to do something major, good or bad. So it still doesn't necessarily mean that they're blessed. It means that they've been energized in ways that normal human beings aren't. But I think I feel hopeful about what the Nadi seem to suggest for that in the long term. That's why I've kind of been, I've kind of felt that it's going to be something that will help humanity ultimately, even though it might not be necessarily, it might not necessarily be the most pure man on earth. I think it's the right person for the right time for the transformation of the world that will happen in the longer future, which is also hinted at in Nadis, all Nadis, because they talk about the movement of the ages, of coming out of the dark ages into the ages of light. They even talk about the lost world. They don't call it Atlantis, but they're about the sunken world and the past and things. There's so much in there that is so fascinating that I can't cover all of that today. I have covered some of it in my books. I might need to reveal more later as time moves on. But so it's a long video, this, guys, but I hope you don't mind. I hope you're finding it interesting, because this. I thought I'd tell you pretty much the main story, and the more I think about it, the more you can't even talk into a video like this. But this Jiva Nadi, let's go back to that now, because that was the other transformative thing in my life, really. And I wrote a whole book. My book, Be Happy, covers that. But the Jiva Nadi I asked, where do I begin? We had a really horrible bit of news. That's when my grandson was born. Everything seemed to be fine. Everything seemed to be all right. Life looked like it was going well again. And another one of these moments came along, one of these turning points that shocks you to the core and makes you question everything about your life, and about the brutality of life. Because we suddenly realized we're going to see an event, a good event, all out as a family. I was going, and me and Jane were in one car. Danielle, my daughter, and her partner, and Damien and my other granddaughter there, Willow, were all in the other car. And Damien, our grandson, he would have been, I suppose, about, I don't know, can't remember how old he would have been there, but he'd been about, not very old, only still babyish. Started having convulsions in the car, and panic station. What's going on here? What's happening with this? So fortunately, they were in the car, so they just drove straight to the hospital in Portsmouth, where we were going at that time, and into the hospital. And we realized, and we got a phone call from them, and all in tears there, that he had type 1 diabetes, and they just managed to rescue him here from this. And it was a real dangerous situation. He didn't go into a full coma or anything, but you can imagine what a shock. Anybody that is diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, it is one hell of a turning point in that person's life. Or if a child of yours has type 1 diabetes, because this isn't like the type 2 diabetes that you can deal with by changing diet and losing weight and things. This is something where basically you don't have a pancreas. The pancreas is just messed up. It won't work. So at that time, it was steep learning curve about having the insulin injections and so forth. Now, I asked the Nadi, but I didn't give any information. I said to Kim, can you consult the Jiva Nadi and see what it has to say for me? And it said in there that it was interesting, because it actually said the word diabetes in there. It came up in the letters of light that your grandson has diabetes, right? And it said that it can be healed. It said, if you do nothing, he will live to the age of 5, and that would be the end of it, right? But there's one formula that you can do that can change the course of his life and can make him survive this. Now, what a message, I mean, you couldn't do this in a normal psychic reading, could you? But it said, but the incredible thing it said, you will see a holy man who can take away the diabetes, or not take away the karma. It didn't say it could cure him of diabetes, but it could take away the karma, and he could live a full life, right? And interestingly, the holy man is right with you now, right? Now, I finished the reading Kim. I read it because he typed it out to me and sent it to me, and I just finished reading it. And I looked down at my phone, and I popped a picture of Sharavana Baba, who's this holy man that we went to see a time before. Now that's another story. We'd come to see him, and he said, "How long? I've been waiting for you for a long time. Why haven't you come before now? I've had to come to you." He actually was in London, but he came down to a house nearby us, and we went round, and he literally was round the corner from us, 5-minute drive, less than that, I think. And and it was an amazing story, but that's another story in its own right. But picture of Sharavana popped up on my phone. It was the app given a message. I thought, God, the holy man is with you now, and I looked down, there it is, just like that, and I thought that's what it means. Does it mean Sharavana? And so I immediately, well, not immediately completely, but I immediately thought of that and thought, well, I'm going to check this out. And what is that? What it means? So I rung up and found out where Sharavana was, and they said, "Oh yeah, you can come and see him. He's going to be a place you can come and see him in London here. Come and see him. He's come over." He says, and they said to me, "He's expecting you," right? And that, which is odd, because I wasn't a big devotee or anything. I'd only seen them once before, I think it was. And so I cleared it with Danielle first of all. I said, "Look, I've had this Naadi. No, I didn't. I'm telling you what it said. It's not a good thing. But do you mind if we all go and see Sharavana, because it says it can help him?" I didn't at that time. I don't think I'd tell her that it was he given 5 years to live. He'll die at the age of 5. So we all decided to go up and see him, and it happened just he was in London. And now that's another interesting story, but I'll briefly tell you what happened there. And it happened, and it was described in the Naadi too, strangely enough. But it happened the storm broke when we had to go up there. It was the beast from the east, they called it. They told us nobody must travel. Don't travel to London. There's a huge storm coming in of snow, and don't travel. We travelled, and we took the kids, and we went up the motorway, and the storm hit just about everywhere, but not the motorway. We kind of drove through the middle, like the eye of the storm. We were all right all the way, and we got to London, and we eventually got to see Sharavana Baba, and he said to us, "I've been expecting you. I've come specially. Where's the boy?" Right? And there we go. Where's the boy? And we brought Damien into him. He didn't do anything, didn't do any healing things or anything like that. He did go into a trance later on as the children left the room. He went into a trance, and he channeled what is called the Naga, not Nadi, Naga, the snake level, as it were. Now, don't be put off by that either. These are like some of the higher beings. People relate it to the idea of the space people. That's all explained in the Nadi as well, some of those things. But I'll have to talk about that another time. But there was the energy, and he handed us in his hand some turmeric, which is in the middle of the hand. Told us the child should eat that, right? And he is thriving. It worked out. So the Naadi there had told me to see the holy man. The holy man had come from India. He said he'd come specially, made that trip specially because he knew this was going to happen. Healing had been given. Damien is all right. So it makes me think, wouldn't you, that the Naadi there saved the life of a grandchild, and transformed my own life in so many ways as well. And it's given me a vision for the future. It's shown me. You see, I think, like, telling the future, you always think, is it possible to actually predict the future? Is it possible? But when the Naadi gives you these very specific things, you think, yeah, maybe the future can be foreseen. But it also tells us that the future is not set, because we can also do these what's called remedies, right? We do these remedies to clear the bad karma. And in my case, the remedies took me all the way to India, because I'm kind of jumping back a bit now. Before this, I told you the story about Sharavana and what happened there. But after I'd done those initial Naadi readings with Vivek that I told you about, the first ones where we put all the safeguards in place, I had to do this series of remedies. Now, the ones that you see on the website with Dr. Q, which I'll talk about at the end, they were remedies that were can be kind of quite standard remedies that people can use. But I had to do these very specific remedies, which were very complicated, some of them. I had to go to specific temples to do specific rituals. I had to feed people. I had to buy cows for people. And there was all sorts of other things there. And after those readings with Vivek, I brought in the other readings that I started to do with Kim Pesol, the one that had the Nadi, the Jiva Nadi, the miracle Nadi. And also dealing with another man that I still deal with a lot, Mr. Prakash. So I got Mr. Prakash's readings through from the Brahma Nadi, which is another Nadi, that gave me the whole chapters of my life. It gave me all the chapters of what will happen for each thing. It tells me about what will happen about a legal dispute. It will tell me what will happen about the various things that are going to happen with this YouTube channel, for example, and my books, and about the spiritual center and how that will develop. It's all in there. But all of these things are still the current trajectory. They're not necessarily say this will happen exactly as. The good result will happen if you do these remedies. So I had these complicated remedies to do. I tried to do some here. One of them was very interesting. I had to go to see a Sai Baba, but this is the Sai Baba of a Shirdi temple, and do a remedy there. And while I was in a town, I found a Sai Baba of Shirdi temple. It was just a doorway, literally. And while Jane was out shopping, I popped in and said, "This is Sai Baba Shirdi." So, and I said, "Can you do the ritual for me?" And it's all done. And we had that one done, and I went away again. And I never found that place again. I went back to try to look for it again. It was gone. I thought, was that a doorway into something that was in the middle of an English town? It seemed so odd, above a shop. You know, was that a real place? I still haven't found it. Now, I don't know for certain. I'd love to perhaps go into detail and look again, but I couldn't find it for the life of me. So it makes you wonder, did a portal open up there or something? And then I went up to London and used the temples in London to get some of the rituals done. And some of them, they said, well, really, you need to go to India for these ones. So then I thought, well, all I've got to do is go to India. And Kim Pesol said to me, well, look, go to India. I'll organize it for you. And we had the other remedies done by Mr. Prakash. So I went to India. And I did what you can see it on my movie, Mystic Journey to India, which is on Amazon Prime. We managed to get together a team, me and Simon, and the two of us were able to film it. And this was before you had all the GoPros and the easy way of filming stuff. We took a red camera, which is a big, heavy, clunky camera, plus a SLR cameras, and the recording it was difficult, and all of it, and the sound was difficult to do. But we did it, two of us, and we traveled over India, and we filmed it as I went and did my remedies there, which meant feeding people. You may have seen that, feeding people in a children in an orphanage for disabled kids. Incredible experience that. The idea with the remedy there is that you're going to feed these people, but it comes from your hand. That's an incredible feeling as you put you put the rice and you put it on the plates of these kids. It's an amazing feeling. It's a sense of gratitude. And it's not about ego or anything. It's about clearing karma. It's about getting rid of all that negativity in my life by doing good actions to another person. And I'm not an emotional person normally, to be honest. But the feeling that when I gave a cow and a calf to these old people in India was so powerful. And it's transformative because you're feeling something happening in your spirit. You're starting to see the reason and purpose of your existence. You're moving on to the why I'm here business. I'm here to serve. All of us are. And that's part of it. And I'm here to awaken. And I'm here to awaken others and to be part of something, not coming from me or my ego or who I am, but we're just part of this Godhead. And you begin to feel like it's not me doing this, it's the universe doing this. And then I also fed villages, and we went to some of the little villages in the middle of nowhere, and we gave them fruit and and food and things, little grass huts, literally grass huts they were living in. And we're all walking everywhere barefoot for this. And we're going into all the temples and doing the rituals. And we're going up the holy mountains of it, as it were. We're up the holy mountain of Arunachala, which I thought was beautiful too there. And we went down to the very, very south of India, and the waters poured over us out of the holy wells. And we did rituals with the fire ceremonies and all of it. And you're there person to person doing it. And amongst it all, Mr. Prakash took me also up into the mountains, and we met a holy man. I had to also meet a holy man. So we tracked down the holy man, a Siddha yogi, as they call him, all covered in ash and all matted hair. And we went up into his, and just as we arrived, strangely enough, you know, he arrives only once every 6 months. And as we arrived, and as I put my foot onto the ground there, it was perfect timing again. These weird synchronicities of absolute perfect time. As I put my foot onto the ground, he arrives. He comes out of literally out of the bushes and starts walking towards the temple. And I walk behind him. The sheer timing was amazing. And then he goes around the temple and does all these fire things, because he could sleep in a fire. One of the things he would do is sleep in a raging fire. This isn't cold walking. This is laying down in a burning fire. And being perfectly all right. You know, he doesn't singe. Even his hair, you think his hair would burst into flames because there's so much. It just doesn't singe. And that was amazing too. And I go up, and he stood up higher, and I touch his feet, and he says a load of amazing things to me. He says it in Tamil, but Mr. Prakash is translating. And the same things that were said in the Nadi, not Mr. Prakash's camel Nadi, from another Nadi. So Mr. Prakash didn't know this. And it was telling me again about building the spiritual temple and centers and things like that. And I thought, well, there's confirmation again, more evidence, more confirmation, more saying, look, why are you here? You're here to do all this wonderful work, and what a wonderful service it is. And it's not about you, it's about doing these things and being part of the joy of all. And there's a man that had been, before he'd been quite a rich man, I believe, and he threw it all away when he'd had Shiva come to visit him, you know. And we went round and saw other stuff there where other miracles had happened and miraculous things. There's another Swami there that disappeared into just light, just in front of his devotees, just evaporated into light. And once a year on my birthday, of all dates, again, strange synchronicities, he will appear. We didn't see him appear, but we went to the places, and it seemed like the priests in the temple, every one of them seemed to know that I was on a very special mission. They were actually, people were coming out of villages to come near me, because I think there was an energy around me. Now, it's not me, but there was an energy of light around me. We were doing something tremendously special. You know, I'd become the center of this cyclone, as it were, and I was moving, and the energy of the earth, you know, I kind of wanted to give all my money away. Mr. Prakash wouldn't let me do it. I just wanted to take that. I don't need that. You know, it was just spontaneous. You know, it was something had taken you there. And all of this had been triggered by these nadis. I mean, it was just amazing. And I think I'll probably stop there, because that's one part of the whole long story. You can see some more. You can read my books about it. I've written it all, but even that doesn't cover it all. My books, Messages from the Universe, Mystic Journey to India, and another book, Be Happy. If you're interested, you can look at those there. You can find them on my website. It's up on the screen there, psychics.co.uk. Find them there if you want to. But in a lot of places, it's free too. The Mystic Journey to India. I put it up for free. I think they charge a bit now. So, but anyway, you can see that on Amazon Prime if you wanted to explore that more. But even that doesn't really touch the energy, the inner transformation that happens when you go on this incredible journey. Now, people obviously ask me, you know, well, can I get my Nadi done? And for many years, I said, well, I can't recommend, because I've also came across some that were complete frauds. Really, there was one that used my name, put my name up, and said I'd recommended it, and I had to go through all sorts of hoops to stop that, because you've got to be very, very careful out there. very, very careful indeed when it comes to choosing a Nadi, because it could have done the complete opposite for me, couldn't it, if I'd phoned a fake, put me on a complete wrong course. So I do kind of still recommend Dr. Q now, because he's been very good. And there's a link on my website for that. So I put a link in the description to this video, so you can go to that link. Now, Dr. Q, who was on one of the big shows out there recently, so he's absolutely miles of waiting lists now, unfortunately. But Dr. Q does prioritize anybody that I send. So if you come through me, go to and have a look at the link in the web below, send me an email through the contact form and say it's for a Nadi, and I'll forward it if you like. A lot of you have already done that, and a lot of you are very pleased. So that's it, and that's kind of the first steps of the Nadi, because it will give you the basics. It'll give you an overview of your life, and because it's got proper translation, you probably don't have to go through the hoops I went to try to understand it, and you don't necessarily have to go to India to do the remedies. They can be done for you by proxy. And I also sometimes, for my patrons, some of the patrons, not all, but occasionally, so patrons I get to know, I will also recommend Mr. Prakash to those ones. Now, that's more of the person-to-person thing that I do for people who've already maybe had a Nadi done with Dr. Q. I will then put you onto the deeper stuff, and you can start to go on that journey. Sadly, Kim Pei-sol's died, so I don't have access to the Jiva Nadi now, but who knows, maybe in fullness of time. But that might be for those that need to go to India and do it the full thing, Anyway, so there's my story of the Nadis. It's been a long chat with you today, but I hope you've enjoyed that. And thank you for following this channel. I know we do go off on a lot of political stuff and that, but that's what you have to do if you're making predictions, And I go off on a few rants about that, but I thought let's balance it all a bit today and have a chat about some of the most deep spiritual stuff that's important to me. Okay, thank you again for joining us. See you again. Don't forget that thumbs up. Don't forget to follow the channel. See you soon. Bye for now.